All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. Today we're going to talk Deshaun Watson. We're going to talk stock up, stock down with the Ravens and Bills changing the complexion a little bit of the AFC. Then we'll get to NFL Defensive Player of the Year and close out with the opening night of the NBA and a look at the Western Conference. Let's start with Deshaun Watson, Drew. What are we doing with Deshaun for this week, where the Browns are 3-point dogs at the Seahawks, and longer term, where the Browns are plus 240 to win the AFC North? He came out of the game in the first quarter after looking terrible. He was cleared to return and then just didn't return, probably because he looked so terrible. But Stefanski says that he will play in Week 8. So what do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, in the moment, in the game, it felt a lot more like benching than anything else. And considering how poorly he was playing, I don't think you can really hold that against the Browns decision makers. They got PJ Walker some practice reps last week, so they maybe felt like they had a better chance with him in that moment, and they made the right decision because the way that Watson was playing, I think they were probably going to lose that game. And so now what do we do with this week? Presumably he's going to get more reps in practice. Presumably they're going to have him in a state where he is a little bit more prepared to play. But I will say that every clip I've seen now of his practice throws and then the limited action we saw in game looks to me like he's still dealing with a pretty significant injury. It's impacting his downfield throwing to the degree that outside stuff and 15 yards down the field stuff is coming in low and behind players. And that's a recipe for stalling drives. Every third and any third and long is going to be almost an auto punt. And when you're going up against the Seahawks team that has a very formidable rush defense, that spells trouble. So I think you have a pretty one-dimensional Browns team on the road in Seattle against a defense that is pretty lively. And I think long term, Browns have 4 wins. They have the best defense in football, possibly. I'm ready to put a line through them.
Wow.
I think there's too many other good teams in the AFC North. I think they're probably going to finish 4th. I think in that context, like there's not a lot of other good AFC teams. Like, don't get me wrong. Like this has been a huge underperformance by everyone not named, Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs to this point in the season. And I think the Ravens are the rightful favorites in that division right now. I think the Steelers can still accumulate wins with a little bit softer schedule than the Browns and Bengals have, at least in the immediate handful of weeks coming up. And then Bengals are going to get better and better and better as Burrow gets healthier coming down the stretch. In fact, coming out of their bye, he might be ready to go. And the guy we had priced preseason as, a co-favorite for MVP. So I think the Browns are in deep trouble. And I think it starts and ends with the fact that Watson is not fulfilling his upside, which was the entire narrative around how the Browns were going to, break through in a very competitive AFC this year.
I think there's reason for skepticism around the Browns. I do think, though, that they're going to be saved a little bit by the fact that their schedule is very kind the rest of the way. They still have home games against Arizona, Chicago, the Jets. They play at Houston, at Denver. They're home to Pittsburgh. Like, they don't really have, outside of at Baltimore, no terrifying games on the schedule. We'll see. At Cincinnati, Week 18. Week 18 is always difficult to price incentives, but that may be difficult as well. But I think that the fact that the next 2 games at Seattle, home to Arizona, if you come out of that 1-1, you're 5-3 with a still relatively soft schedule to close. And then Deshaun, the book on rotated cuffs is that it's 4 to 6 weeks. The Indianapolis game, I think, was 4 weeks after his injury. So if he is right, full to go in 2 weeks, then I think they'll be okay for their season with that defense, with the offensive line that they have. But certainly, I thought a week or so ago that this was the best team in that division, and I don't think you can say that any more clearly. I think Baltimore are the class of that division, and the Bengals might project a better team the rest of the way than Cleveland, but Cincinnati's schedule is horrifically difficult. So we'll see. And then there's the Steelers, who are just still there with Kenny Pickett and friends, just lingering at 4-2. Let's touch on some other quarterback situations quickly. Jalen Hurts limped off the field yesterday, which is not great. He did not look right in the second half. He had a knee brace on. Gardner Minshew was warming up at halftime. So I think that's really just a wait and see. The Eagles have their bye in a couple of weeks. But just before their bye comes up, they're going to play home to the Cowboys in a game that will shape the NFC East. So I think that's largely just one to monitor. Daniel Jones, we'll see. Trevor Lawrence, I think, will be okay. What do you make of the quarterback stuff at the moment outside of Deshaun?
Yeah, I'm watching Thursday Night Football very closely for a sign that Josh Allen is a little bit more sharp than he saw against the Patriots. There wasn't a lot made of some of his inaccuracy, but that really definitely did play a factor, I think, in limiting Buffalo's offense against the Patriots. I have less concern about Trevor Lawrence after seeing how well he performed on Thursday Night Football. I think he's probably a full go against Pittsburgh. I have relatively. I have no doubt that Hurts is going to play through this. I just am a little bit worried about it. Do they change the game plan to try to limit his exposure in a way that, kind of maybe takes a bit of the top, reduces the ceiling of the Eagles offense a little bit. So, maybe just worth monitoring. And then outside of that, there's really no injuries at the quarterback position that move the needle, Daniel Jones inclusive. I mean, Tyrod Taylor's played better. I don't know how else to say it. He's been more effective. He's had a better kind of awareness in the pocket. He's not taking sacks as aggressively, even though the offensive line has all the same problems. And so I guess as long as he's under center there for the Giants, you have to have a slight upgrade on that team. Tannehill, I'm not expecting to go against Atlanta. I think that's going to be the Malik Willis show. And I think that offense is in deep trouble.
Yep, I agree. That's not looking great for the Titans. And yeah, it seems like they are largely beginning to punt on the season, given where they're at the moment. All right, let's get to the Ravens, who I think were the big winner in a way out of Sunday, where they emerged from a game where they're only 3-point favorites against the Lions in what was perceived as a slightly weighted coin flip in their favor, and they completely just rinse Detroit. And now Lamar Jackson's MVP odds shortening. He is the number one quarterback by PFF grade. The defense looks immense. Do you think this is the second best team in the AFC right now?
I'm fine with that. And in sort of the same sentences, we're coming off of talking about injuries, and there wasn't a lot of kind of headline top line stuff this week. It's important to look at a team like the Ravens, who are getting healthy, and I think recognizing the fact that this is a team that is now kind of getting huge question marks, answered. In a positive sense, was a huge differentiating factor against that Lions team. Rewatched that game this morning. The degree to which the Ravens won in the trenches was startling. I think I can't remember if it was the first or the second drive. I believe it was their second touchdown drive for the Ravens. 3rd and 3. Lions had everything perfectly covered. Lamar Jackson had something in the ballpark of 15 seconds in the pocket to let that play mature, and then ultimately finds Aguilar in the end zone. I believe it was their first touchdown. It was a swing pass out to the left. Ronnie Stanley gets out in preceding blocking, and he blocks his man clear out of the back of the end zone, just like a vintage Ronnie Stanley from years. We haven't seen him play that well. The fact that this Ravens team, I think, got through the early portion of their season, where granted the competition wasn't especially good, but they got the wins that they needed to get to stay kind of in the hunt for the 1 seed, while kind of getting through a cluster injury at the offensive line. And some difficult injuries in the secondary. I think that's, potentially being under. I definitely was under considering it. I bet against the Ravens a number of times already this season on the back of how injured they were. And by the way, now they're healthy, and Lamar Jackson is playing at an especially high level. And I think the fact that you have an offense that is still growing under Todd Monken, and that we have not seen the ceiling of yet, should scare people in the AFC. And the fact that Mike McDonald is one of the better defensive coordinators, if not the best defensive coordinator going in the NFL, should scare people, because he's paired with Roquan Smith and a fierce, starting to put together a pretty fierce secondary there. So it's pretty clear to me that this Ravens defense is for real. I think I had no issues whatsoever putting them, clearly in the top 5 as far as what a defensive rating ought to be. And I think you need to have the Ravens, kind of just on the outside of the top 10 offensively, but recognize that there's really only a delta for them to go up as long as Lamar Jackson is healthy.
Yeah, I have a Ravens AFC ticket that I purchased at a sportsbook in Las Vegas in February when I was out there for the Super Bowl last season. And I can't locate the ticket, Drew.
No!
16-1 is looking good. Somewhere in the house, though, a baby may have eaten it, which would be a terrible way for Ravens 16-1 to go down. But I will certainly ramp up the efforts to find it if they keep playing like they are at the moment.
One more thing I'd like your opinion on. How many teams could have had Lamar Jackson for 2 first-round picks, Jay?
I just never understood the whole Lamar thing in the offseason. I still don't understand.
What in the world?
Yeah, I don't think anyone really, even with the injuries and everything, I don't think anyone considered him like any lower than the 6th or 7th best quarterback in the NFL, which is pretty bloody valuable.
Yeah.
And I think you touched on it with the health. The sneaky thing with the Ravens is that ever since Lamar's MVP season in 2019, this team's just been riddled with injuries to a comical degree. They got ravaged by COVID in 2020, and they had to basically punt games where Trace McSorley is at quarterback. 2021, by the end of the season, they had no players left. They had no one in the secondary at all, to the point where they're literally triple teaming Devontae Adams. And Aaron Rodgers is saying in the press conference afterwards, I've never seen that. I've never seen anyone do that, triple team a wide receiver, because they had nothing else. And Lamar got hurt at the end of that season too. Then he got hurt at the end of last season. They also dealt with injuries again in the secondary. And then they were injured again to start this season. Like guys like Ronnie Stanley have been out, missed time. Now all of a sudden they're healthy. And I think, to your point, this team randomly just haven't really had pass rushes since Elvis Dumerville and that kind of era. And now all of a sudden, Owe is really good. Clowney is giving them something on that front. And the secondary, Kyle Hamilton's playing at an excellent level. Humphrey will get better and better. So, and this defense is just kind of loaded with Queen, Smith, linebacker. This is maybe the best defense in the AFC alongside the Browns. And then on offense, Lamar, the thing is that last year his best weapons were Devin Duvernay and Demarcus Robinson when Mark Andrews wasn't full go. Now he has healthy Andrews. Odell Beckham is good again. He's not, New York Giants Odell, but he's a very useful receiver. Zay Flowers is good. Aguilar is what he is. But he has weapons. This is the best context that Lamar has had, certainly since 2019. And he is back looking that game on Sunday. That's the best he's played since 2019, I think. Yeah. That's pretty scary. So I think that they have kind of separated themselves with the fact that the Bills may have just reached the tipping point of no return with their injuries. And the fact that the Dolphins are now 0 for 6 in big games under Mike McDaniel. They genuinely have not won a big game under Mike McDaniel, and there have been quite a few of them. But let's talk about the Bills, who, I agree, Josh Allen didn't look amazing. Still, they scored 25 points, which should have been enough to beat the Patriots. I understand that they got some help from their defense there, but they didn't get any help from their defense on the last drive. And the Bills, after they converted the 2-point, I think the live money line was minus 1,000. And a lot of that was baked on the idea that maybe the Patriots will drive down the field, kick a field goal, and then it's a coin flip or close in overtime. Mac Jones just goes out and wins the game. Do you think that the Bills can bounce back, or is this team now just kind of a wild card team that is mainly drawing dead in terms of Super Bowl hopes?
I think they can still be a factor, but I think that putting them in the upper tier of the AFC is foolish, considering who they are trotting out defensively. This is now a team that needs to change their identity from balanced offense and defense are both excellent to a team that needs to find ways to play, play from ahead. I think you need to find ways to sustain drives. The Bills under Josh Allen offensively have always had a whiff of an identity of just absolute ridiculous explosiveness at times that was just uncontainable, right? And while that's a fun way to win and fun to be a fan of and a fun to back, a team to back, they need sustained drives in order to keep their defensive unit off the field, because right now their defense as rostered can only really rush the passer. They can't cover well. They can't stop the run especially well. And in particular, they can be picked on. Like, there are clearly places that you can scheme to matriculate drives down the field against them. And so this was their intention of who they wanted to be offensively coming into the season. And if they realize that potential, and if Josh Allen is playing at a top 3 QB level, they can upset teams in the playoffs. Absolutely. Yes, they can get into the playoffs. They can get into the wild card. They could still win the East. I think it's entirely, still within the realm of possibility, even though they are 1-2 in the AFC East, that they could still win this division if they win out, in division. And I would say that the fact that they are being exposed now, this time of the season, where, games against the Giants and the Patriots, right? And then Bucks coming up this week before you really get into the meat of your schedule where the going is going to get tough. Like, it's probably for the best for them to kind of start to find a new way to win if they're going to reach their potential. So I'm not tearing up any Bills tickets. I'm not kind of writing this team off. The offense is still clearly top 5, in my opinion, in the NFL, as long as Stephon Diggs is healthy, as long as Josh Allen doesn't, his shoulder injury doesn't get worse, then I think this is a unit that can still score 30 points in a given game. But they're going to need to be a little bit more creative in ways to keep their defense somewhat protected, shaded. Just give them some better chance to succeed, considering they're going to be at a talent disadvantage. The market makes the Bills a top 5 offense. Strong agree. The market makes the Bills still a top 10 defense. Strong disagree. I think that this is a team that you can bet against in terms of points conceded until the market adjusts them to kind of 20th, which is where I would have them considering their personal.
Yeah, I think that they may have just reached the point in no return where now they've lost basically all for the season. You've lost your number 1 cornerback in Trey White. You've lost maybe the best linebacker in the NFL, Matt Milano, and you lost Daquan Jones, who's your best interior defensive lineman by margin. And now you're counting on, Russo is a great pass rusher, but now you really rely on Leonard Floyd and Von Miller coming off the injury, and there's just not enough at corner. Like, it's guys like Benford and Dane Jackson, Kaya Elam. Like, there's just, these guys were supposed to be in secondary roles, and now there's just nowhere for them to hide because Trey White is gone, and he was the guy who's supposed to, defend Tyreek Hill. I would be higher on the Bills if not for the fact that they still have these games on their schedule. At Cincinnati in a couple weeks on Sunday Night Football, Jets, who they always struggle against offensively, at Philly, at Kansas City, Dallas, at Justin Herbert, at Miami. That is an absolute gauntlet. And, I think the 1 seed is basically gone. And they're a dog to win their division after dropping a game to the Patriots that they really had to have to win the division. And they're still live in that. And they're a 30 to 35% chance to win that division, but they're up against it. Say there is a 3-6 matchup in week 1 where Baltimore host Buffalo. What would you make the line there, all things considered equal?
Baltimore -2.5.
Okay, so you think Baltimore are now better than Buffalo?
I think so. Neutral power rating, yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. I think the Ravens would certainly be favored in that game, and they wouldn't have been two weeks ago, I think.
No question about it.
Yep. All right. Before we get to Defensive Player of the Year, it's an inter-conference clash on Sunday night, Drew, when DJ Moore and the Bears travel to Southern California to battle Justin Herbert and the Chargers. Get ready for kickoff when coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. Bad vibes around Justin Herbert at the moment. Nothing serious.
Don't love it.
Yeah. On the Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry and Connor Rogers today, I said, and didn't get much reaction from the comparison, though I thought it was a good one. I said that on Sunday, that Justin Herbert on the sideline reminded me of Andy Roddick, just looking across and seeing Roger Federer on the other sideline and Patrick Mahomes.
No, that's very
Producer
good.
Adam liked it, but didn't get much. It was to be fair, it was my second tennis comparison analogy of the show. And I think that, those guys were done after the first one. All right. Defensive player of the year, Drew. Myles Garrett is the favorite at plus 200. Parsons plus 225 with TJ Watt, the same price. And realistically, this award goes through those three guys. Aiden Hutchinson, I was high on him a couple of weeks ago. Not feeling as good about that anymore. If I was going to throw out one long shot, and the only guy I've really got any interest in would be Chris Jones at 30-1. But outside of that, I'm almost putting a line through everyone in this market outside of the top three. Chris Jones, and I guess Nick Bosa, if he has a 3-sack game or something like ASAP, then maybe he can get back into it. But what do you make of this market? Do you agree those top three are that far in front of everyone else?
I do. And the fact that, Watt and Garrett are coming off of games where they both had such spectacular highlights has obviously leveled the market here. Right. There was pretty clear likelihood that Parsons was going to drift, I thought, because he was on bye. And the guys were playing and they played well. But at the same time, it's probably going to be a 3-horse race here for the duration of the season. And you're going to have to, I think, count on the Steelers continuing to win for TJ Watt's case not to drift. You're going to have to count on Garrett's defense not conceding 38 points to Gardner Minshew, which is still a weird head scratcher. Browns conceded 38 points. Myles Garrett moves into Defensive Player of the Year favorite. Did not seem congruous and would not have expected that if you had told me that was how this was going to go. But here we are. And I think the fact that I kind of want to put a line through the Browns based on their offense is going to hurt Garrett's case. And so I think this is a long way of saying Parsons is still probably the rightful guy here. Anytime you have a Dallas Cowboy in contention for an award, keep in mind that he's going to play on Thanksgiving in the most watched game of the season. Keep in mind that he's going to play in some other very, very high profile games on Sunday afternoons and Sunday nights as we come down the home stretch. And he's going to get a lot of support if he continues to play as well as he had through this portion of the season. So sitting on Micah Parsons, I think that the jockeying and the market kind of settling here as a clean 3-horse race is correct. And I think if I was going to take a long shot here, and the counting stats aren't really there, but there's a world where the Ravens pull away cleanly in the AFC North, and they clearly people decide this is a better defense than Pittsburgh or Baltimore or Cleveland, right? In that world is Roquan Smith talked about, because the Ravens' advanced defensive metrics since they made that trade, he has been a complete revelation, and he's paired with one of the brightest minds in the defensive game in Mike McDonald right now. So I'm going to ruminate on this a little bit more. I know that the counting stats is going to be tough for him to break through, but if all three of these guys, if he specifically beats out the other two teams in his own division and is recognized as, player on that level, and Parsons just kind of doesn't really accumulate the counting stats this year, then I could see a steal for Roquan Smith. And I think his price is pretty favorable right now.
Yeah, I don't mind it just because they're as good as the top three guys are. There are weak points. There are ways that you go south for all three of them. Garrett's team is kind of teetering a little bit, and the quarterback situation is a mess. I still make Garrett the favorite just because, one, I think he's been the best player of the three guys to date. He closed the gap on TJ Watt. Yes, TJ Watt it's weird because an interception is much more impactful than a sack just in general. But as someone who is against TJ Watt in that market, I would rather him get an interception than a sack, because I don't think people really remember the interception come the end of the season, whereas the first thing they'll look at is the sack total. And I would rather Garrett have 7.5 sacks to Watt's 8 than 7.5 to 9 and no pick. But I do think that Garrett, the fact that they gave up 38 points and the perception of that defense cratering a little bit yesterday, that's a problem. I still think it's a really good defense, a top 2 defense in the league. And I think that was a bit of an outlier. And the fact that Garrett had, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, basically forced a touchdown and blocked a field goal. Like, that's a ridiculous 100th percentile game from a defensive player. And I think the fact that they just escaped with the win was really key, because now they're 4-2 and they're favorites to make the playoffs. And I just think they're better than Pittsburgh. Whereas, we're talking about Cleveland's uncertain quarterback situation. Pittsburgh have a certain quarterback situation. There's no uncertainty there. There's no upside. At least Deshaun Watson.
I don't know. A lot of people excited about Kenny Pickett's fourth quarter. I don't know if you saw it, but he got a good quarter in there.
Yeah, no, he's better against the Reds, but I don't. And the Steelers have a pretty easy schedule as well. So he's right there. My problem with Parsons is, do you know where Micah Parsons ranks in the league in sacks right now?
Yeah, it's not good.
He's 16th. Yeah. He's 16th in the league in sacks. Like that, he's coming from a fair way back statistically. And I understand he's having a bye this week, but Watt and Garrett have already had their byes. Like he doesn't get to gain a game on them later. So I don't mind it on Roquan. In a similar vein, like this guy's definitely not going to win now, but after Marshawn Lattimore started the season off like insanely well, and the Saints, they opened 2-0 and the defense was looking great, I bet on Lattimore at like 250-1 to win Defensive Player of the Year, with the idea that he could be the face of a top 2 defense on a division winner and just be regarded as the best cornerback in the league. Yeah. And so for guys like Roquan Smith, Fred Warner, guys of that ilk, I think there is a pathway, but the odds are that just one of Parsons, Garrett, and Watt, will make the playoffs and will have a good enough statistical case that they win. But I wouldn't put a complete line through the rest of the market, I guess.
We're on the same page here. If you gave me money today and said you must bet into this market, give me Roquan Smith 100-1 over any of those guys at 2-1.
Okay. Yeah, fair. I don't mind it. I think Garrett should be shorter than 2-1, to be honest, because I think I believe in the Browns a little bit more than you do.
Okay. My only kind of pushback on Garrett then is they're going to have another game like that, or a couple more games like that, where they don't get away with the win.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there could be moments like that. He's a dog to win the sack title. Certainly there's ways it goes south, but I have more faith in his team than T.J. Watts, and I have more faith in Garrett compiling stats than Parsons. And so I think he just kind of hits the sweet spot there of those three, where I'm just worried that T.J. Watt, that Kenny Pickett's just going to lose 3 games in a row at one point, and then it's just done in terms of that team's perception. I just worry about Parsons just getting double teamed so much. He's got 5 sacks in 6 games. He made one play against the Chargers, drew a holding penalty as well on another play, but he's coming from a fair way back statistically. So Garrett is the guy for me, for better or worse. What a great team to cheer for, the Cleveland Browns. Fantastic. Really get involved with PJ Walker. Hey, quickly, because we're not covering this award, but do you know who the number 1 rated cornerback is in the NFL by PFF grade?
Is it Witherspoon?
It's Witherspoon.
Yeah, that feels right.
Yeah, he is an absolute menace. He might be better than Sauce Gardner was last year, to be honest, just because of the plays that he makes. He's only like 1 sack behind Jalen Carter, I think, in addition to being the best cornerback in the NFL. He's a heat-seeking missile. I've never seen anything like him. I think he and Carter should have much more condensed odds in the DPOY market, though Carter's pretty imposing as well. All right, before we get to Lakers and Nuggets, basketball season is here, but there's still time to squeeze in your fantasy drafts. Get the RotoWorld Basketball Draft Guide, which includes all the rankings, player outlooks, and projections you need to win your league. Go to NBCSports.com to get your draft guide now and use code preseason25 to save 25% off and receive a $10 Fanatics E gift card. All right, basketball. It's here tonight for people listening to this. Nuggets, 4.5-point favorites over the Los Angeles Lakers. The total is 229.5. Have you had a bet on this game?
I was looking hard and have been considering strongly playing the Nuggets, but I have not pulled the trigger, and I can't really give you a solid reason why, other than I think I'm just going to watch this and look for an in-game opportunity to come in on them. It's a fun matchup. Obviously, we get to kind of relive what was a really successful betting experience in the Western Conference Finals. And the Nuggets pretty clearly have a solid mismatch where as good a defensive player as Anthony Davis is, there's no way to stop Nikola Jokic and what he does offensively if as rostered. Lakers in general, I think, are coming into the season with a lot more questions answered than they were last year. And so I think people may look at them as a bet against early on, thinking that this is going to be like deja vu all over again, early season Lakers swoon. And I'm not really there. I think what I saw from them so far in the preseason is a team that does understand what their identity is and, has pretty healthy superstars. And that matters. So I think this is going to be a pretty competitive game. The Lakers, to me, are a team that definitely lets the game come to them a bit. They rely a lot on transition. And so I think them covering this game is going to really come down to, are they getting defensive stops, or, how are the Nuggets shooting the ball? And I think, that's what I'm going to be looking for live in order to come in on the Nuggets, because ultimately I think the Nuggets can pull this one out, even if they do find themselves at a halftime deficit.
Who's the sixth best player on the Nuggets, Drew?
Boy, I don't have a strong answer on that.
It's like Christian Brown is probably the answer. I think there's a lot of respect for the Nuggets now, and a lot of people saying, like, how are they not the championship favorite over the Celtics and the Bucks? But I think that it's being a little bit slept on, the fact that they lose Bruce Brown, they don't replace him at all effectively. They bring back Reggie Jackson on a bizarre deal that seems like it was effectively a handshake arrangement at the trade deadline to bring back Reggie. And also the fact is they've got no depth, and this team didn't have depth exposed at all last year because they were basically completely healthy. So I'm a little bit worried about the Nuggets this season in terms of being just accumulating regular season wins, because they're going to be playing, a lot of Julian Strawther, I guess, and Christian Brown in an elevated role, and Reggie Jackson is actually going to be counted on. So I'd be a little bit concerned about their outlook there. And then also, there's no other team that's super intimidating in the West in terms of the playoffs. So if you have the Nuggets as the favorite just because of Jokic and the starting five, I get that. But I don't think this team, I think this team is like a step below Boston. I think that, and I think the Bucks are probably better as well. But what do you think about that Nuggets skepticism, or do you think that this team should be considered, a joint title favorite?
Well, you're disrespecting my guy. I had pulled up my player level model, and sixth best Nugget is Zeke Naji.
Okay.
Zeke Naji. That's Naji with two N's. I don't know. I'm just telling you what my numbers are saying. And Christian Braun would be number 3. Should be number 7. Reggie Jackson. Oh my goodness, his numbers have completely cratered. Justin Holiday's numbers have cratered. DeAndre Jordan. Let's hope he doesn't get minutes. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean your points are fair. The depth is very, very, very spooky. But when it comes to top 5, you have a clear 5 positive players. Like the only other team I can say where you have clearly 5 positives as your starting 5 are the Boston Celtics. Otherwise, every team has a question to be answered in their starting lineup. Even the Warriors, who right now Klay Thompson is coming in as a minus. And I think, as long as those 5 guys are available at the end of the season, the Nuggets are still the team to beat in the West. I think the fact that the Nuggets have home court advantage to the degree that they do with altitude and teams coming through there on back-to-backs, like all of those are real factors that are going to help, kind of buoy the win total for this team and kind of keep them, near the top in a very competitive Western Conference this year. And I also like the idea of you kind of look at Murray, KCP, Porter, and Gordon, like you just look at their career trajectories, and they're all on the come up right now. Like we don't really know what any of those guys' ceilings are. Gordon, maybe the one guy where you can say, "Nah, we've seen it," but the rest of that crew is still improving, and Nikola Jokic makes them all better players. And so I'm still pretty clearly in the camp that the Nuggets are the team to beat, not just in the West, but in the finals this year, because Jokic, again, in a playoff series is such a singularly difficult matchup offensively, that I think, the Nuggets, it's going to have to be something weird, like a major injury to one of these, one of the key guys here forces extended minutes from Reggie Jackson before my confidence is going to be shaken in the Nuggets.
There's a lot of Reggie going on this team. I think
Man,
the concern, I think, is that so KCP, Jokic, Gordon, Murray, Porter, they all played 62 plus games last year. A lot of that was resting Murray and Porter missed time. It's just if one of those guys misses an extended period and then all of a sudden you're slotting Christian Brown into the rotation, and all of a sudden you're requiring like Peyton Watson to give you actual minutes off the bench, and that's the kind of thing where it might get a little bit dicey. I think the starting five is still the best in the league, and Jokic is the singular best player. So I think I preferred Phoenix in the West until they traded DeAndre Ayton for Yusuf Nurkic, and I like Nasir Little and Grayson Allen, but that just I don't like Nurkic. I don't know what the point of his is on that team, and I'm not sure that you really want him on the floor to close games in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals in Denver. But he's going to have to because there's no one else who can play center on that team. So it's a little wonky. But let's talk about these guys in conjunction with the other game, which is Warriors -1.5.
yeah.
Home to Phoenix, and the total there is 232.5. I think the Suns are the most interesting team in the West this year because they have the highest range of outcomes. Or if they win the title, absolutely, that's in play. And then also, one of their guys missing a chunk of the season and then being a 5 seed and losing in the second round is also in play.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you at just generally on Phoenix?
I think we know who Phoenix is, so they're not as interesting to me.
Okay.
I think Phoenix is clearly a top 3 offense, and the defense is going to be a work in progress for the entirety of the campaign. And that may not be enough to hold them back from ultimately being in the final, Western Conference Finals. But I do think that the incomplete nature of the roster that existed when they originally traded for Beal has largely been addressed. I think the team made some nice moves, particularly their role in the Dame Lillard trade, I think did create a lot more flexibility for this roster. And while, you're going to be relying on minutes from some fragile pieces and some guys who, still get beat like a drum when they go up against Jokic, it still is a pretty dynamic offensive picture here. And I actually think you're looking at a potential for pretty decent upside out of your small forward who no one may know in Josh Okogie. He fits the pieces of this puzzle pretty well, and I think they're going to be in the 125, 130 point a night type of output pretty regularly. I don't know how you choose to, you can't really choose to defend these guys, especially, coherently. At least no one that I see in the West is really well rostered to defend these guys well. Maybe the Lakers are the toughest test for them in terms of just defense that they match up against. The Warriors with the healthy Draymond Green would kind of be in that mix too, I suppose. But it's definitely going to be tough for teams to limit them and limit their offensive production. So they're going to be in every game. And I think excited to see basically what they can produce offensively, and just excited to see when you have 3+ offensive players that are as good as Durant, Booker, and Beal, the spacing that creates can be pretty magical. So excited to see what it looks like, and excited to see if Frank Vogel can get these guys to play defense for this particular matchup against the Warriors. Again, not expecting Draymond Green to be available for this one, which is a big deal. His absence will be felt because his particular defensive flexibility against a guy like Durant is massive. And I think the Suns probably get a pretty comfortable win here.
Yusuf Nurkic in 2019 was +6 EPM, which was 8th in the NBA, better than Kevin Durant and LeBron James and Kawhi Leonard.
I have Nurkic as a meaningfully plus player for them, and the only question mark is availability, because you don't necessarily expect him to be broadly available, and I think he's maybe your one hope at getting some meaningful first half minutes against Jokic, if that's your Western Conference Finals. I'm very also intrigued to see how the Suns play. Like, what are their rotations like? Like, is Nurkic like a heavy first half guy, or is he getting, closing minutes? Because I don't think you really want to close with him. But I think, that opens the door for, pretty interesting kind of splits in betting the Suns first half, second half, etc.
Yeah, Nurkic turned 29 like a month ago. That's weird. I thought he feels a lot older than 29. I might have to
29 hard
recalibrate.
years, Jay. 29 hard years.
Yeah, I might have to recalibrate all my feelings and emotions around Yusuf Nurkic, because him having a +6 EPM season and only just turning 29 changes things a little bit. He looked kind of done last season. Maybe he was just playing on a Portland team that was largely going nowhere. But he certainly doesn't finish around the rim anymore, and he just doesn't seem as defensively impactful. But they're going to need him. And I think, yeah, I agree with the rotations. Like, they just have a lot of human beings on this roster that we don't know about. I think we kind of do know about Josh Okogie. I think he's just good, and I think he will stick. But between, what does Eric Gordon have left? KBD is a huge analytics darling, but hasn't really done anything. Utah, what will he provide? I think Grayson Allen, we kind of know what he is, and Grayson Allen's good. He's just solid. And I think it's so underrated on teams that are laden with superstars, just having a guy who just is a lights out A+ shooter on the floor, because you just know that they're going to get open looks. And I thought the Bucks were, I think they will miss him. The fact that he's not there, and he'll help. Yeah. He'll help Phoenix. So, yeah, I don't know. It's not a great place to be, riding with the Phoenix Suns over the Denver Nuggets in a big picture sense, but I do like this Phoenix team. With the Warriors, last thing before we sign off, will you take over or under 47.5 wins on Golden State?
Okay, so for me, the most interesting team is the Warriors. Okay. Because so many of these players are at the point where they have kind of stalled out in terms of the aging curve, which means the potential for the shoe to just kind of, the floor to fall out from under these guys. Klay Thompson is at the top of that list. His numbers, if you haven't looked recently, are not what, his advanced numbers are not good. And that's
never really been good, though.
I know, but at least at one point he was a very important complementary piece, and his numbers were positives. Now we're starting to get to the point where he's not bringing much, and his complementary nature is all of a sudden in question. Draymond Green is still an elite defender. I have him as still a top 5 defender in the league, although I am concerned, and I don't have a good read about what's going on with this injury he's going with right now. It's a left ankle, and we're estimating a return before we get to Halloween, but I am not hearing good things. Like, he's, especially spry in practice or looking good or really kind of ready to take this year by storm. So nervous about that, and also just really confused about how Chris Paul fits into this picture. It's possible that in the absence of Green, he's a fine kind of guy to slot and play small, and you live with what you get with more minutes from Looney, and so be it. And then when Green comes back, he's more willing to slide into a complimentary role. But his play last year, particularly down the stretch, was really, really quite suspect. And I think he's best served as a 6-man type of role for this team. But who knows if he's interested in that, or if he's capable of that. I just don't have a good sense there. So huge questions with basically everyone who's dealing with aging curve issues, and then the one outlier is Andrew Wiggins, who is still getting better, and I would expect him to be fine. So it's a tricky math problem there.
Yeah, well, there's one other guy who is on the right side of the aging curve, and he to me is maybe the most interesting guy playing on night one, and that's Jonathan Kuminga, who quietly was a monster in the preseason and looked like a new player, and his true shooting percentage was close to 70% while leading the preseason in scoring, which was immense. So we'll see. It's the preseason, but usually that is a pretty good indicator for someone's role and a potential just leap in terms of capability, because they've raved about him in the offseason, and he's got the raw potential, being the 7th pick in the draft, where he's going to be a guy to monitor. Yeah. All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks everyone watching on the YouTube channel, and if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe to us. And also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you tomorrow.